Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. And joining me to preview the Texans Cardinals game, Ed Smith, the host of the Bleav in Arizona Cardinals podcast, part of the Bleav network. Ed's also a former NFL tight end in the late 90s with the Falcons, Eagles, Lions, and Washington. So a great history for him. Thanks for giving us a few minutes, Ed.
Hey, appreciate you having me on, Robert. I've been looking forward to it.
Now, do I have this right? I was looking at your history. Did you play for Andy Reid and Donovan McNabb on the Eagles for a few games?
I did. That was my, in 99, I was there with Andy in his rookie coaching year as well as Donovan. So, it wasn't the greatest team, but it was definitely filled with some entertainment. And, Andy was just getting rolling. But, yeah, I played on that team. Doug Peterson was actually one of our quarterbacks as well. He's now a head coach in the NFL. And there was a few other guys, some big names on that team as well. But, yeah, I was there with Andy and Donovan.
Did you see the potential in Andy at that point? What did you think back then?
I didn't see it initially, and I'd been around a few different coaches. I played for Coach Dan Reeves, Bobby Ross, a few others. And I didn't see it, but I won't say – I can't say it wasn't there. It's just it wasn't blossomed yet. It was his first experience, new coaching staff. I'll tell you another interesting thing, Robert, on that staff was John Harbaugh, who was a special teams coach. He's now obviously the head coach there in Baltimore. It was a great staff, a lot of interesting coaches and players. Andy, I didn't see it, but now that it's done, now like he's the finished product, I'm like, yeah, I should have paid closer attention because he definitely had the ability to do what he's doing. I just, like I said, it was real early in the process in that rookie year.
Yeah, it's interesting because Andy, before he went to the NFL, he was a tight ends coach at University of Missouri when I was going to school there. So I covered the Tigers, but he's tight end. So I don't remember if I even had a conversation with him or anything like that. Yeah. And you just look back and you're like, oh my God, that guy was here, and then all of a sudden it's a whole different ball game for him. Everything sort of changed, but yeah, we had some interesting guys that went on to the NFL from that college staff, which was funny because they weren't good. I mean, it wasn't a good team at the time, and it wasn't a good time in the Missouri program. We're having a little bit better time of it this year, but I also know that NFL tight ends run in your family. Your brother Irv, also a tight end, and his son, your nephew, is a tight end right now. Tell our Texans crowd who your nephew is.
Irv Smith Jr. He spent, his college years at Alabama and then went on to play with Minnesota for 4 years. First year over there in Cincinnati with the Bengals. Very proud of him. He's been dealing with some injuries off and on through his career, but there's so much potential there. I hope it just eventually gets unlocked. And, because he's still young, 25 years old, I think he is. And, got a lot of ability within him. And I know he makes myself and his dad, my brother, very proud. Every week he's out there. It's, fun to watch him carry the torch on.
What did you get a chance to catch the Texans game then at all with your nephew playing?
I did. I got the package. So that was a very disappointing game. I'll tell you how disappointing it was for me, Robert. We all do the fantasy and we do the suicide pools there. This was the week where I finally, with limited teams to choose from, I chose Cincinnati to beat Houston in my suicide pool.
I could see it coming.
Knocked out, man. So, it's one of those I just kept thinking, there's no way they're going to lose to Houston. And sure enough, they lost to Houston. So I'm out of the pool. All that money just gone away to somebody else.
All right. Well, I'm asking a bit what you thought of the Texans, but let's go to your team. And then Kyler Murray's first game back, 19 for 32, 249 yards, 1 interception, no touchdowns. How do you look?
I was expecting a lot of rust, especially coming back from, prolonged injury with the knee. It's not like he pulled the hamstring in camp and just had to work through everything. He actually tore that knee up, had the operation shortly after, was out of action for almost a year, because I think it was a good 11 months. And I was expecting some severe rust and then also some hesitation in his game, because we all know one of his secret abilities is all his speed and elusiveness. And I thought he might look a little apprehensive out there. And I'll be doggone, after first series or two, I started thinking to myself, no, he looks pretty good. And he's running around, he's escaping, keeping his eyes up when there's traffic around him. Didn't have that cautiousness, like, people around his legs and, like maybe he was a little skittish. He played really well and, didn't throw a touchdown pass, but actually, he ran one in, showed his ability to still run the ball and extend plays. And I actually thought he looked really good considering, being away from the game as long as he did with the lack of talent around him. This roster that they put together, they stripped it down to the bone, Robert, and we don't have an abundance of talent on the outside, wide receiver, running back. We do have James Conner. We got him back this past week to help Kyler, but with what he was working with, I thought he looked really well. Got the victory. That's a number one right there, and on to the next week. I think it's going to be a tougher opponent. Heading over there to Houston, obviously, especially as well as you guys are playing. But it was good to see Kyler back on the field.
Yeah, my normal co-host, Sports Radio 610's Sean Bijani, who covers the Texans all the time for them, the Texans affiliate. He's out there pretty frequently and says that, D'Amico's pretty worried about Kyler Murray's legs and what he could do to the Texans potentially. But the thing I'm curious about is what's the feeling, Ed, from Cardinals fans? How do you feel about Murray, yourself, and then the Cardinals fans as him for a long-term answer for that franchise?
That's the $1 million question, Robert, because we don't, they've been saying all the right things as far as our GM, Monty Ossenford and Gannon and Petzing offensive coordinator. While he was rehabbing, it was, hey, Kyler's doing everything we've asked of him. He's our guy moving forward. And, what were they supposed to say? Well, we'll see when he gets back what he looks like. And, we might have him back or he might be our franchise guy. We don't know. So what they've done is they've done all the politically correct speaking. They did finally get him back on the roster and in a game. Now it's going to be interesting to see what their plan is moving forward. Do they finish out the year with Kyler, maybe win a few games, and in my opinion, maybe a few games too many, which elevates that, draft pick? Because right now we went into last week before the win with the number one overall pick, also having your first pick in Houston, but that pick is now elevated all the way up to the 20 spot because you guys continue to do well. So, what does the organization want to do? Do they want to continue to play Murray, win a few games, push that spot, even further up? What are the thoughts? Do they want to move forward with Murray, or are they interested in, some of these other quarterbacks that might be coming out in the draft? We're not going to know. I haven't a thought. I think what they'll probably do is play Murray, maybe a total of 3, maybe 4 weeks here in the middle of the season. And then their thought might be, hey, let's sit him down. One, because we've seen enough where this team isn't going to the playoffs. We don't want to risk injury or anything like that. Or maybe other teams have seen enough where they might be interested in him. Maybe we can work something out trade-wise. And also, we don't want to win too many games in this meaningless season and take us out of that high draft position. So I wish I had a crystal ball that I could tell you that I knew the answer. I'm going to be watching just like everybody else, trying to see if I can read the tea leaves and dive into their minds. But, they've got to be excited, one, that Murray is back and he looked as good as he did, because if he's their quarterback, that was a great sign. Now what they'll have to do is build around him. And if he isn't their future guy, then they can say to other teams that might be interested, look how well he's doing, and let's talk, and like I said, they'll figure out the draft position and all that stuff moving forward. But it's going to be really interesting to see what direction they go. Me personally, I think they might be inclined to move off of him because of the money issue alone. He's on that big deal now compared to if they go and draft somebody. We know how the organizations love that rookie contract with the quarterback position so they can maneuver other positions. So we'll see. I wish I had the answer, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on it just like everybody else.
What percentage of the Cardinal fans want them to tank and just, don't want to see any more of Kyler?
It's tough because nobody wants their team to not do well. You like to see those W's, but at the same time, if you put your GM hat on, I don't necessarily, would say the T word tank, but you wouldn't mind if they lost a few more games and stayed high. I would say Oh my goodness. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say probably 60 to 65% of the fans, they know how hard it is to find a franchise guy. And it appears we have one. Why, rock the boat and go get one of those rookies when you already have a proven commodity? I do think there's a big percentage compared to the 65% that maybe they've seen enough from Murray, or they think we can do better if we go find one of those other younger quarterbacks, free up some money, et cetera, et cetera. So, but Murray's done exceptionally well. He's not the most cordial guy, and he really hasn't let fans get into his world where he's out in the public doing a lot of things. But I do think, most realize how tough it is to find a guy. And if you already have one, why get rid of him or let him go somewhere else?
Lots of Cardinal Texans connections. The first connection I want to hit is head coach Jonathan Gannon. The Texans interviewed for him for their opening. They seem to like him. What's their early thoughts for you on Gannon with the Cardinals?
I like what he's done so far, Robert. I like the fact that when he got here, he knew what he was taking over. And along with Austin for it, I think they got together and had a plan of, hey, if we're going to strip this roster down, it might be tough sledding in the first year or two, but let's do it. Why just get rid of a few guys and keep some of this mediocre talent and try to build from there? Hey, let's break it all down. We'll get guys in here, according to our draft philosophy and free agents and stuff like that. And what I like the most is this team, even though it's lacking in talent, you would never know that through the first portion of the season. Most of the games, this team has been in them. We even had a chance to win, opening weekend against Washington. We had a 20-point lead against the Giants. Couldn't finish that one off. We did beat Dallas. We've gone out and we've placed San Fran and the Rams and respectively, hung in there to a certain degree each week. You won't see any give up on this team, and that's what I like the most. I told our fans at the beginning of the season, it's not going to be so much about the wins and losses. It's going to be how this team is out there playing, and even in defeat, do they look like they were still out there fighting to the last whistle? We incorporated some different mindsets and attitudes even in training camp. No more late to meetings, walking in as the clock hits whatever time, or eating in the meetings, bringing food. He started developing that kind of culture, and that's impressive to me. It's not easy to do sometimes with some of these organizations. And I actually compare it to what you guys are doing over there in Houston. I think you can tell the mindsets are changing within the facility, and that's sometimes even more important than the W's and the L's. And as far as I'm concerned, I think he's heading in the right direction. You eventually get the right talent on the roster, continue to learn on the fly, on the job. There's some things I'd like for him to be maybe a little more aggressive, maybe open the playbook even more and throw the ball down the field more. There's certain things I'd love to see, but the beginning stages, I think he's done a pretty good job and would definitely give him a passing grade for my mind's eye.
All right. Another Texans connection is obviously the Will Anderson trade. What did you think of the trade? Because the consensus nationally was the Texans, they gave up too much draft capital. Most Texans fans agreed, even though they were very excited about getting Will Anderson. What was your reaction, Ed, when that trade was made?
Yeah, it was a head scratcher from looking from what you guys gave up to get him. From our perspective, it was, like I said, the tear down was on. We knew what they were doing here in terms of trying to clear up, not necessarily cap space, because we didn't have a whole lot on the roster to, kind of get rid of. But, hey, they were stripping it down. And it did mean maybe it was going to be a little tougher times around here in terms of, the wins and losses. But we dealt with Robert for 4 years plus with Keim and Kingsbury. I mean, it was, every year it was like, what the heck are they doing? And with that trade with Will, it was almost like, okay, I can see what they're trying to do. And it was a good start for him. And, things have worked out, I think, pretty well for both sides so far.
Yeah, I just wondered because, you're kind of banking on that next first round pick being high for the Texans. And I don't know if things have changed as far as the thought process in that trade, because now that you're not getting a high pick from the Texans next year, giving up a top 3 pick, you don't get a lot of chances at those. And yeah, there was a lot of draft capital, but, I kind of feel like it's maybe a different story now that you look what happened with the Texans. I don't know.
That's why on the flip side, you are correct there, because that portion of it has been, it's always good to get a first round pick, but we were thinking it was going to be a high first round pick. And then as you guys continue to clip off wins, it just keeps tick-tocking on up the ladder. So from that aspect, yeah, it really hasn't worked out how they thought it would. But at the same time, like I said, it's still going to be a relatively good pick, even if it's in the middle or upper part of the draft. And the other part is we still have our first round pick. It's just a matter of where that's going to be, determined by how much we win with Kyler in the lineup. And that's why I'm kind of curious how long they let him stay in the lineup, whether, like I said, as soon as they quote unquote see enough, they shut him down so they can get Clayton Tune back in there to, like I said, clip off some of these L's to elevate that pick a little bit. But you are correct. Like, so we thought that pick was going to be much higher initially, and every week it turns out, and here we go, we're coming over to play you. You get a win against us, and it'll go even higher. So it's really ironic.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts on the matchup. Just the Cards' run defense down near the bottom with the Bengals. Devin Singletary took advantage of that last Sunday, and about the first sign of life for the Texans running game. There hasn't been much, but the Cardinals, according to the numbers, look way better against the pass, 11th in the league. What's been the good and bad with the Cardinals defense so far?
The lack of talent is killing us, Robert, because we don't have those big names up front anymore. Chandler Jones just a couple years ago, J.J. Watt decides to retire. We let some of our other free agents go. So we don't really have what you would say a stalwart guy up front to help us stop the run. At the same time, our cornerbacks are young and inexperienced. The only marquee name other than Zaven Collins, who's continuing to get better, is Budda Baker, but he's your safety. He's at the back end of your defense. We constantly watching Budda make his way toward the line of scrimmage and making plays, but you don't necessarily want that dude all the way up there at the line of scrimmage. That's, you get that play action, and next you guys are out the backside. So the biggest problem for the Cardinals has been consistency in stopping the run, because if you're allowed to run on us, which is most teams do, that opens everything up as far as the rest of their offense. And what's kind of happened to this team is initially they've been able to stay in some of these games all the way into the third quarter. And obviously it's before Kyler, so we'll see what happens moving forward. But with a backup quarterback, we've been able to hang in some of these games, slow other offenses down, but eventually you start to see the cracks by the third and fourth quarter. Teams take advantage of it. We'll either take a lead but we fall behind too much where we don't have the firepower to come back. So it's almost like pick your poison. Because of the lack of a front, if we send too much to try to help stop the run, we then have trouble covering in the secondary. And a constant enemy of ours is always tight ends or somebody who can infiltrate the middle of our defense, because once you do it, it's almost like the floodgates open. So, tight ends have had success against us. On the positive, we haven't given up a bunch of huge plays, meaning over the top, getting beat, but we've allowed teams to do everything they wanted in front of us and across the middle of the formations, and that's where our weaknesses are. So, we'll see what the attack is. Singletary, golly, I just picked him up last week on a fluke, on one of my fantasy teams. And of course, I sat him. I didn't play him last week because I thought I had other better options. He would have been the better option. So we'll see how the plan of attack is kind of slated for this week. But I imagine you guys come out and give us a heavy dose of Singletary. Stroud is playing so good right now. He opens up play action, and, he's taking care of the ball, not throwing it to the other team. As long as you guys are careful with it, you should offensively be able to do some things. The biggest mystery is, what is Kyler going to look like in game 2? Does he turn this into a shootout, or do we see a little of that rust that I thought we might see in the first week? But, it's going to be an interesting matchup for sure.
I don't know how much you've seen of CJ Stroud, because we never get it to be on national TV, obviously, but is there any thought from you on the MVP buzz that he's starting to get? Do you feel like that's real? Is that a possibility? Or do you think he's that good?
I have been watching him, and, I got the package and everything. So nice little setup on Sundays, and I get to watch all the games, and I've been paying more and more attention to CJ, and I've been so impressed, especially like I just mentioned a minute ago. Most rookies, it's almost like Christmas for them. They love just giving the ball away as much as you can. Most of the time a mistake, obviously, because everything looks so fast to them out there. What's impressive to me is the game. He's making it look like it's already slowed down a tick for him. You know, you'll hear quarterbacks always talk about they knew like everything started to slow down, and he does not look like he's rushed. He looks like he's reading, going through his progressions. They have a great game plan for him each week, it seems. You know, like I said, who knows who might be second guessing themselves even over in Carolina. Maybe he should have been the number one dude. I'm sure you guys are very happy with what he's done to this point, and I think it's only going to get better. Eventually, what they'll start doing, in my opinion, because right now I'm sure they have a limited amount of stress like on his shoulders, meaning they're not going to ask him to do too much, you know, until obviously it gets to late in the games and he's been able to put the cape on and win a couple in those last, you know, fourth quarter drives and stuff like that. But at some point, they're going to get so confident in him that the game plan and everything expands. I like the way they're bringing him along slowly, though, right now. And he showed that, man, this game is not too fast for him. He's a very intelligent young man and very confident, and I think he's only going to get better moving forward.
Yeah, Bobby Slowick's got a pretty big playbook, and he's thrown a lot at him. So I don't know much that he hasn't and can't handle at this point. It's pretty amazing. Texans favored by 5. How do you see this game playing out on Sunday?
Man, I tell you, it's going to be interesting. As long as you guys don't have that hangover from last week and looking ahead to next week, I think this is a game that if you have a good game plan of, hey, let's stay with the run, not get too fancy. Let's see if we can take advantage of their front. Time of possession should be in your favor. I think this game it's not going to be a lopsided game because I think Kyler will keep us in it. But I do see this game as almost like the announcement that maybe we should start paying more attention to Houston. I think a few weeks ago, you guys played Carolina, and that was one of those games as, you know, you lose it, and it's like, how the heck do you go over there and lose that game, give them their first and only win when everybody's been kind of building you up a little bit? And that might have been the wake-up call. We're not as good as everybody is, you know, talking in our ears. So in order for us to win, because we're a young team, some inexperienced in some positions, we have to come with our A game every week. So that might have been a good lesson to learn, you know, a few weeks ago. And if the game plan is tight and everybody stays on point, this should be one of those games where after it's done, I think a lot more people are going to be looking and saying, hey, maybe Houston is for real this year. And they are ahead of schedule, but actually for real in that 7th spot as far as the playoffs, if the season ended today. And I do think myself personally, I am picking you guys to win this one. The spread is, you know, 4, 4.5, 5 in a lot of places. I think you should win comfortably at home. You know, score-wise, this is one of those 24 to 17 or 20 games. I think it fits right in there. But I'm definitely going to be picking you guys at home against the Cardinals, who will not give up. It's not going to be an easy win. We're going to fight. But I think you guys just have a little too much talent for us over there. If you're focused, you should win this game.
Yeah, you said the Carolina game was a wake-up call. Well, the whole season has been the Texans struggling a little bit against the teams that they should beat and doing really well against the good teams. I think they've got the best record of any team in the AFC as far as their percentage against the best teams in the AFC. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah. And I don't want to keep you too long, but just find it fascinating. You played for the Frankfurt Galaxy, right? In the World League?
Yes.
And I believe your head coach would have been Ernie Stautner, who was the DC for the Cowboys' doomsday defense, Too Tall Jones, Danny White. I kind of grew up, you know, watching some of them. I mean, not a fan of the Cowboys, but you saw them all the time on television for sure in Houston. And
yeah,
he was a Hall of Fame player going back to the 50s Steelers. So incredible guy to play for, I would assume.
I absolutely loved Ernie. He gave me my start in football because I played 9 years of minor league baseball before making the switch. And, you know, the World League was considered a possibility for me to make the transition. And I remember the very first time I ever met him, Robert, I was told to go to a room because there were 8 teams. The only team that was was going to take a look at me was Ernie, and they were told, look, you can put him on your roster. We won't even count him to your roster. You can keep him as long as you want, cut him if you want. So that was the offering of me to the World League. Ernie took the bite. I remember, hey, I was told to go to this room. It was in Atlanta where camp was. Camp had already been going for like a week and a half or two, so I was late getting there. I was told to, go meet the head coach. I knocked on the door of this hotel room. Yeah, come in. Open the door. Coach Stautner never even turned around and looked. I said, hey, Mr. Coach Stautner, my name is Ed. He's like, I know who you are. Go take your physical. If you pass it, I'll see you on the practice field tomorrow. And that was like, okay. So I went, took my physical. Next thing you know, I'm suiting up the next day and going over there and playing for Coach Stautner, for Ernie. Man, that dude was I couldn't have played for a better man, getting back into the game after being away from it. He taught it the right way. He also cared about us as human beings, not just football players. And, he was such to put him on my roster of coaches that I played for, along with Coach Dan Reeves and a couple others. That's like he's on my Mount Rushmore, Robert, in terms of coaches that I played for. Ernie, Dan Reeves, like I said, those two dudes. But like I said, that's great that you bring him up because he was such a good dude.
Yeah, one of the things, if people don't know, the legendary Taste Great, Less Filling commercials from Miller back in the 70s and 80s, and I think it went on way past that. But those commercials were staples for years and years, and he was one of the originals on those early commercials for the Taste Great, Less Filling. He was that big a deal back then, and just an amazing career for him, just all the way through. Starting with the 50s and all the way through. You played minor league baseball for the Cubs and the White Sox, right? For several years before you could.
9 years right out of high school. I played I was drafted in the 7th round by the Chicago White Sox. Al Goldis and his office, got me in the 7th round. I was there through 91 into 91, got traded to the Brewers, spent 2.5 years there, then finished up with the Cubs and Indians in my last 2 years. When it was all said and done, I played 9 years, reached AAA. I was up in AAA when, different things happened as far as the strike in 94, which spilled into 95. And I also played through the steroid era. So there were so many things going on, Robert, that kind of forced, and I never took a steroid in my life. And I didn't cross any lines during the strike, but things worked out where after 9 years, I was kind of sitting around like, man, this is getting ridiculous. And I need to go do something else, and I didn't know what that something else was. And I had a crazy thought after thinking about going and playing some football. And lo and behold, to be able to get into the NFL, play for Ernie over there in the World League, get back here, play a few years in the NFL, play in a Super Bowl with the Falcons in 98. You're talking about an incredible ride and journey. And it all, a lot of people ask me, do you regret doing that? I have no regrets at all, because the thought was, well, you made it to the NFL. Well, just think if you'd have went and did that right out of high school. Nah, I got to play 2 professional sports and, see them and experience so much and meet so many great people and so many stories. And that, like I said, everything worked out the way it was supposed to. And truly feel like I was blessed to, do that dual citizenship between both sports.
Yeah, and if people don't remember the Falcons when they went to Super Bowl, it was the famous Dirty Bird. Yeah, the Dirty Bird team. And then Chris Chandler, former Houston Oilers, was your quarterback, right?
Chris Chandler, yes, sir. Yeah, I'm actually going back. Had no idea. How time flies by on you, Rob. It's the 25th anniversary of that team, the 98 team. So I was invited back. I'm actually going back December 9th and 10th. Yeah, 9th and 10th. They're actually honoring that team, and they'll do some activities and stuff on the Saturday. They'll have us on the field Sunday, watch the game from a suite. And so I'm going to go back and enjoy this and hopefully see some of my old teammates, some great stories and just, great fellowship with, that for that magical run. But I'm looking forward to it,
That sounds pretty fun. Remind everybody about your podcast and how they can connect with you on social media.
Yeah. And first off, thank you for having me on, Robert. Really enjoyed being on with you. If anybody wants to follow me, all my Twitters and Instagrams, there's Ed Smith Speaks. So that's all my handles on those. I also do the Easy Sports Talk show where we're national. We just went national earlier this year. Our home base is right out of Houston, actually, with Sports Map Radio. So if you go to Sports Map Radio, we're in 35 states, 98 affiliates across the country. The Easy Sports Talk show, my partner and I, Javon. We also do the Bleav in Cardinals podcast. We do that twice a week. If you go to ezsportstalk.com, you can find our schedule on there. Wherever you get your podcast, look up, Bleav in the Cardinals or the Easy Sports Talk show, because we also do podcasts for that 3 times a week. And then the national show is every Saturday from 1 to 3 Eastern time on the Sports Map platform. So those are all the different ways you can follow me in. If anybody's interested in my story and the book, if you go to edsmithspeaks.com, that's edsmithspeaks.com. There's a book page and also a radio page and stuff like that. But if you purchase the book directly from my website, it comes from my stash, directly signed by me and mailed out and sent. So I always encourage that over the old Amazon. So if anybody's interested in the story, the name of my book is Easy Does It, The Journey of a Lifetime. So feel free to go to edsmithspeaks.com if you want to get your copy of that. And like I said, all the other ways you want to follow Javon and myself. And once again, can't thank you enough for having me on, Robert. True pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's a hell of a story. I'm sure that book, and just want to remind also everybody out there that our listeners, me and Sean will be back tomorrow talking Texans, Astros hiring Joe Espada, all that stuff. And our last show we just did earlier today, don't miss it, because we did a whole thing with Salman Ali talking Houston Rockets, the hottest team in the NBA, the biggest shock of the NBA, and some of the storylines going on there. So hell of a lot going on. So we're doing 3 shows along with our live Texans show as we do every Sunday. So good stuff. Thanks again, Ed. And we'll talk to everybody again tomorrow.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.